record profits. It's a fantastic time. Lots of companies doing exceptionally well, but a few are being hit. British Airways, when I went and saw them about 4 months ago, it was really, really down. They had a 7% drop in overall passengers and something like a 13% drop in the premium first class and business class, which is a lot more profitable. In fact, where are your most profitable customers if you're an airline? Well, like for most of us, who's your most profitable customer? The last one you just got, right? Your last one, because it's like marginal, right? They've increased your fixed costs by 0, and so there's a whopping big contribution, right? Your last customer. So as soon as you start to lose customers, it really bites into your profits. And if you're an airline, of course, the people you make money out of is the last 10% as you fill the plane, right? First 90% just covers your cost. That last 10%, that's where you make all your money. So if you lose those, it's really terrible. So yes, really bad for automobiles, for holiday travel, stuff that is big. We have to plan it anyway, and it's very easy for us to, postpone it. It's very easy for us to have not a reason to buy. A few weeks ago, I was in Cancun, in Mexico, which is a very nice place. And it's their high season, and it was just empty, of North Americans. Everyone was speaking Spanish there, except me. There were no North Americans there because they have all, they've done a lot of postponing, and of course the swine flu, which just gave them, and there was no more swine flu in Mexico now than there is it's probably more in London, but it allowed people to have that reason not to buy. So it's that sort of stuff. But, so you get stories like this. This is a guy who decided that he really loved Christmas. So he decided to have Christmas every single day. And he has done so for the last something like 7 years. He's eaten staggering amounts of turkey, and he drinks champagne every day. I mean, it's not a bad way to go. Although he suffers, he watches the Queen's Christmas message every night. So he's a total nut, and there's a lot of good reasons for him to change his behaviour, but here he is in the newspaper saying that, with these tough times, he's not giving up the champagne, but he's now making it last 2 nights instead of 1. And he's not posting, he posts Christmas cards every day. He's not posting the Christmas cards, I think largely to himself anymore. Okay, so there are a few consumers making changes, but not a lot. 1970s, this is actually a really good time to learn from. 1970s are way worse than we've had recently. I mean, it was a really terrible time. A long, protracted time of stagflation where you had contracting economic growth but rising inflation. So people were getting hit on both sides. The misery index, as they put it, was really, really high. This is when Jimmy Carter lost the election to Ronald Reagan. I mean, he just could not win. He was just, there's just no way you could get re-elected when the economy was this bad. And so, what happened? Well, actually, when you look at Nielsen data, a lot of supermarket categories grew over that period. A lot of categories grew. And the prices were going up at the same time, and yet they were still able to grow. And we didn't see a flight to private labels, in spite of the fact that people were bringing out some private labels at that time, although not marketing them terribly effectively. So even in probably one of the worst economic times in sort of modern history, we actually didn't see huge change. But let me talk about private labels, because private label success probably depends far more on marketing than it does on consumer behaviour and changes because of recessions and things. And here in Australia, we have seen a change in marketing of private labels. So what happens to private labels typically in recession? And there is some research on this. It shows that private label brands tend to be counter-cyclical and that they do tend to grow more during bad periods. But the interesting thing is, when the economy recovers, while there is a switch back and the national brands start to grow a bit more, it's not complete. So private labels grab some share during bad times and they hold on to it. Now, why do you think they grab the share in bad times? The natural assumption is consumers are trading down. That's wrong. I think the real explanation is national brand marketers pull off support. They trim their budgets. And supermarkets will actually also, because they think that that's what consumers want, will more actively promote their private labels during that period. Right? So some of the private label gain turns out to be sort of permanent. And why is this? Well, one of the reasons is that private labels form something of a subcategory. They do largely compete with other brands, but there is a slight bit of petitioning. We've seen evidence of this over decades, but just really, really slight petitioning. But it shows up in consideration sets. Like, if someone considers a private label, it's in their repertoire, they notice it in a category, they're 4 times more likely to notice another private label in another category. So there's a bit of a halo effect. You know, people start to learn about private labels and they start to learn about them across categories. And the other way that private labels are slightly petitioned is that there is a small, and it's not huge, but there is a small part of the market that sort of rejects private labels. And then overlaying that, there's an even bigger part of the market, like most of us, who find it hard to see private labels. We find it harder to see them on shelf. And the reason is they're new and they don't advertise. And that is the big advantage that national brands have over them, that we may have, you know, we may know that these private labels exist, we may think that they're just as good as the national brands, but save us money, and yet we still find ourselves buying the national brands because we want to get out of the supermarket in 15 minutes. And there's 40,000 SKUs staring at us. It's a phenomenally complicated task, so we screen stuff out and we just don't see stuff. Right? So that's normal behavior, and that's the major thing driving why one brand sells over another one. And that sort of petitions private labels. But you can imagine what happens during a period when national brand manufacturers stop advertising so much and the supermarkets start promoting their private labels more. They break through, they start to break through the clutter and they start to get in front of people and they start to get into their heads. And once that happens, it's a permanent gain. Once you realize they're there, it's a permanent gain. Goodman Field would probably kill me for saying this, but there's almost no reason why anyone should buy non-private label flour. Because virtually all the flour comes out of exactly the same flour mills and the private label is half the price. So, you know, once you know that, you know, you should switch, right? And a lot of consumers do, and it's 50% of the share in Australia. But the thing is, it's only 50%. It's not, it should be 100. It's not 100 because most of us, like me, we just keep not noticing the private labels. We go to buy our flour, we buy our flour. We pay double, you know, but we didn't even know what price we were paying anyway. That's the normal behavior, and that's what can break down if the private labels get some attention and get noticed. So there is a real risk in a recession that you lose some customers and that you lose them forever, and it's your own fault. It's nothing to do with the recession, it's to do with your cutting of support. Pricing. What should you do during a recession? The big lesson about pricing is that relative prices matter, not so much absolutes. So don't worry so much that some people have got less money in their pocket and that you therefore should lower price, because that's going to give away a lot of value to everyone. What really matters is your relative price. So what really matters is what your competitors are doing. So at the start of this recession, in actual fact, food manufacturers were raising prices. Because remember, a lot of things were going up. A lot of food prices were going up, and we had energy costs going up. And my advice to them was, that's okay, because all your competitors are facing the same cost things, and they're going to be doing it too. It doesn't matter. The lesson is, of course, if your competitors drop their price, then you do need to react. What factors cause price changes to be bigger or worse? Let me show you. These are the factors that make the response to your price change larger. Let me just show you with a chart here. If you move past other brands, right? If your